Fire Ants Foraging Behavior by Katherine, Donovan. The fire ant came from Mato Grosso, Brazil to the United States about 40 years ago. These ants are known for their sting. For ants, the queen reproduces and the workers collect the food. The workers can range in length from 2 to 6 millimeters. The larger ants tend to forage and defend the nest more than the smaller ants. The smaller ants are known to help with raising the new generation. Foraging includes searching, recruitment, and transportation. The more knowledge and experience an ant has, the better it is at foraging. A foraging ant goes out and looks for food for the queen. The ant leaves the nest and travels towards the food. When resources are encountered, it may send information on its location to other ants. When ants are looking for food, they use their odor receptors at the end of their antenna. What they like to eat depends on the type of ant. Ants usually look for food at night and can travel up to 100 yards from the nest to find food. If it is warm enough, they will look for food all year long. Since fire ants are omnivores, they may eat both plants and animals. Since they can't eat anything big, they primarily feed on liquids. Fire ants have been known to look for sugars. Some can be liquid from plants called nectaries or honeydew produced by other insects. They use their antennae to smell for food. Their antennae have hair-like sensili with sensory neurons attached. The neurons send a long nerve fiber through the antenna lobe to the brain. When they leave the nest, a trail of pheromones is left behind so they can find their way back home. When the food is found, it will leave a different scent to differentiate the trails. This trail is known as the foraging trail. This helps other ants in its colony find the same food source. In the paper titled Division of Labor and Specification of Coasts in the red imported fire ant, Solympsis invertebrans, they looked into the relation of worker size and age to various tasks. The first study looked at the lifespan of certain individuals when food and water were unavailable. The size and age of these individuals is related to the differences in location and behavior. In the second study, the same individuals were looked at when they had food and water, and then they compared them to the first study. In the third study, colonies of different sizes were looked at to see the differences between colony size, individual size, and responses to different food. Study 1 looked at 3 colonies from College Station, each with about 1,000 to 2,000 workers. The colonies were placed in the lab inside an environmental chamber. The arrangement included a nest chamber, foraging area, and tube to collect them. Connected the nest chamber and foraging area. Each worker was assigned to a group based on head width. The 3 groups were minor workers with the smallest heads, major workers with medium heads, and media workers with the biggest heads. In order to identify the workers, they were marked with fine gauge wires. Early in their lives, the ants stayed near the brood pile. When they reached 23 days old, the ants moved to the foraging area. They found 2 small differences in the first study. Minor and media workers were more likely to be found on the broad pile during the first 30 days. And minor workers were the youngest to appear in the foraging area on day 25. The day that they started in the foraging area was usually related to their lifespan. So media workers were there on day 31, but dead by day 36. As far as their behavior, media workers spent most of the time grooming other adults. Older adults were more likely to regurgitate to their younger ants. Study 2 added a solution of honey and water every 2 or 3 days for 1 hour to the colonies from Study 1. When the food was seen, ants in the foraging area recruited ants from around the nest and in the tube. Within 20 minutes, 150 ants could be seen at the food. All of the ants were at least 7 days old and would appear at all of the feedings after they had been one time. The most seen group of ants were the miners. Followed was the media and major workers. They saw that the major workers usually took longer drinks. The results showed that the ants didn't find the food based on odor, but by being recruited. Minor ants mainly sucked on the liquids, while media and major workers mainly used their mandibles to carry chunks back to the nest. Study 3 lasted 3 days, and the food was placed at the end of each plastic box the 6 colonies were placed in. A tray of honey water and a tray of pupae were added every 15 minutes and then removed, in places of separate containers until the ants didn't come for the food for 30 minutes. Overall, the ants seemed to prefer insect over honey, and mostly they stayed in the nest. They concluded that the overall minor ants contribute the most to colonies and in all aspects of activity. Study 2 showed that the media workers had the longest foraging careers, while Study 3 showed major and media workers more likely to forage on insect prey. This may be behaviorally significant. It shows that larger ants may be able to carry pieces of the prey back to the nest. While they do, they give off odors that attract other foragers to help them.